There comes a time in every life when you're faced with criticism, opposition, and the harsh reality of human dynamics. It's easy to feel cornered, to think that you're alone. But what if I told you that you're not? That someone, a true leader, a genuine ally, will stand up for you when the stakes are high, when the critics grow loud, and when the world seems too heavy to carry alone. Stay with me, because by the end of this you'll understand why having someone who can roast them for you is not just a privilege, it's a calling we all need to answer for each other. Life is heavy. It's not just heavy, it's unbearably so at times. You're born into a world that doesn't care whether you succeed or fail, a world that operates by its own set of rules, indifferent to your hopes and dreams. But let's make something clear right now. Just because it's indifferent doesn't mean it's against you. And yet, that's precisely how so many of us experience it. We take the weight of responsibility, the demands of existence, and we feel crushed by them, as though life is a punishment. But what if, instead, we were to see it as an invitation? Responsibility isn't a burden. It's the heaviest thing you'll ever carry, yes, but it's also what gives you meaning. Look, people don't realize how fragile they are until they're confronted with chaos. You think you're strong because you've avoided hardship? You're not. You're only strong when you've stared directly into the abyss of your own inadequacies and chosen to bear the weight anyway. Let's say you have a family. It's not a hypothetical, it's real. Maybe you're married, maybe you're raising children, maybe you're taking care of your parents in their old age. These are responsibilities that don't go away, and you'll resent them if you approach them with the wrong mindset. You'll see your spouse as a burden, your children as inconveniences, your parents as obstacles to your freedom. But that's wrong. That's deeply, profoundly wrong. Because it's in those responsibilities that you find your highest purpose. Think about this for a second. If you woke up tomorrow and had nothing to care about, no obligations, no expectations, what would you do? You might think, freedom. I'd finally get to relax, but you wouldn't. You'd be lost. Because there's no direction without responsibility. There's no meaning in a life that's all comfort and no weight. When you take on responsibility, you're saying to the world, I'll do my part. I'll contribute. I'll stand up, and when you do that, something extraordinary happens. You become stronger. Not because the burden gets lighter, but because you grow to meet it. This is what people misunderstand. They think strength is about avoiding struggle. It's not. Strength is about embracing it and letting it shape you. But it's not easy, is it? It's not easy to say, I'll bear the burden, especially when everything inside you is screaming for rest, for relief. There's a part of you that wants to run, to hide, to let someone else take the load. That's the part of you that needs to be confronted. That's the part that will destroy you if you let it. You might say, but why me? Why should I be the one to carry the weight? And I'll tell you why, because if you don't, who will? If you don't take responsibility for your life, for your family, for your community, then who's left? The answer is no one. Or worse, someone who doesn't care as much as you do. Now, there's something else we need to talk about, and that's conflict. Because let's face it, life isn't just about carrying a burden, it's about carrying it in a world full of opposition. You're not just fighting your own weaknesses, you're dealing with external forces that seem hell-bent on making things harder for you. When you step into the world with a sense of purpose, with the courage to take responsibility, you will face opposition. That's inevitable. There will be people who criticize you, who doubt you, who try to tear you down. And here's the hard truth, some of them will succeed, at least temporarily. They'll say things that cut you to the core. Things that make you question whether you're strong enough, whether you're good enough. So what do? Do you fight back? Do you retreat? Neither. You face it. You face the conflict with grace, with dignity, with the understanding that their words, their actions say more about them than they do about you. But let's not sugarcoat this. Facing conflict isn't about standing there and taking abuse like some kind of martyr. It's about knowing when to speak up and when to stay silent. It's about having the wisdom to discern which battles are worth fighting and which aren't. Imagine this: you're at work, and someone criticizes you unfairly in front of your colleagues. Your first instinct might be to lash out, to defend yourself with equal aggression. But that's not strength. That's impulsiveness. True strength is taking a moment to breathe, to think, and then responding in a way that upholds your integrity. Maybe you say, I appreciate your feedback, but I disagree, or maybe you don't say anything at all in that moment because you realize that their criticism isn't about you. It's about them. Either way, you're not reacting out of emotion. You're responding with thoughtfulness, with control. And do you know what happens when you do that? You disarm them. Not always immediately, but eventually. Because when you refuse to engage in the same destructive patterns as your critics, you take away their power. This doesn't mean you let people walk all over you. Absolutely not. There's a difference between humility and passivity. Humility is strength under control. Passivity is weakness pretending to be virtue. When you face conflict with grace, you're not backing down, you're standing your ground in a way that commands respect, even from those who disagree with you. And here's the beautiful thing about this, it's contagious. When you model this kind of strength, this kind of composure, you inspire others to do the same. You become a leader, not because you're shouting the loudest, but because you're showing the way. But let's be clear, this isn't easy. It requires constant vigilance, constant self-reflection. It requires you to confront your own ego, your own insecurities, your own desire for validation. And that's hard. It's so hard, but it's also worth it. Because every time you choose to face conflict with grace, you're not just winning a battle, you're becoming the kind of person who can handle whatever life throws at them. You're becoming the kind of person who can carry not just their own burdens, but the burdens of others as well. And that ultimately is what it means to live a meaningful life. Not a life free of struggle, but a life full of purpose. Not a life without conflict, but a life with conflict, but a life where conflict is met with courage and grace. It's crucial to understand that not everyone who surrounds you is your ally. People often operate under the illusion that those in their immediate circle have their best interests at heart. And perhaps some of them do genuinely. But many don't, and failing to see this distinction can cost you dearly. The truth is, the world is full of people who will support you only to the extent that it serves their interests. They'll clap for your successes, but only if those successes don't surpass their own. They'll offer advice, but sometimes that advice is laced with subtle attempts to hold you back. Why? Because your growth threatens them. Your willingness to strive for more shines a light on their decision to settle for less. You need to find true allies. True allies don't just cheer you on when you're winning, they stand with you when you're losing. They don't abandon you when the road gets hard, they roll up their sleeves and walk it with you. And they don't tell you only what you want to hear, they tell you what you need to hear, even if it stings. But here's the catch, true allies are rare. They're not the people who flatter you or make you feel good all the time, they're the ones who challenge you, who push you to grow, who refuse to let you settle for mediocrity. And you'll know them by one defining characteristic: when the world turns against you, they don't hesitate to stand up for you. Imagine this, you're in a room full of people, and someone criticizes you unfairly, publicly, harshly. Most of the people in that room will stay silent. Not because they agree with the criticism, but because they're afraid. They don't want to get involved. They don't want to risk becoming targets themselves, but a true ally will speak up. They'll roast your critics not out of malice, but out of a sense of justice. They'll do it because they see your worth, even when others don't. And when you find someone like that, hold on to them. Cherish them. Because they're not just allies, they're anchors. They remind you of who you are when you forget. They defend you when you're too tired to defend yourself. And they expect the same from you in return. But let's not romanticize this. Being an ally isn't easy. It requires courage, and courage is in short supply these days. It's far easier to blend into the background, to avoid conflict, to let injustice go unchecked. But easy doesn't mean right. Easy doesn't mean meaningful. Think about this: every time you fail to stand up for someone you care about, you're sending a message not just to them, but to yourself. You're saying, your worth isn't enough to justify my discomfort. And that's a betrayal. It's a betrayal of them, and a betrayal of your own integrity. This brings us to something even deeper: the balance between compassion and assertion. Most people think these two qualities are opposites. They're not. They're complementary. In fact, the most powerful individuals are those who can embody both simultaneously. Compassion is the ability to see and feel the struggles of others. It's the voice inside you that says, they're hurting. They need help, and it's essential. It's what connects us to each other, what makes us human. Without compassion, the world becomes a cold, cruel place. But compassion alone isn't enough, because if all you do is feel, if all you do is empathize, you'll end up overwhelmed, paralyzed by the sheer weight of the world's suffering. That's where assertion comes in. Assertion is the ability to act, to stand firm, to say, this is what's right, and I won't back down. Now, imagine combining the two. Imagine someone who feels deeply but acts decisively. Someone who understands pain but refuses to let it dictate their actions. That's power. That's leadership. That's what it means to be truly strong. But let's not pretend this is easy. It's not. Balancing compassion and assertion is one of the hardest things you'll ever do. Because compassion will tell you to give, to yield, to sacrifice. And assertion will tell you to stand, to fight, to hold your ground. The tension between these two forces can tear you apart if you're not careful. So how do you find the balance? You start by understanding that these qualities aren't opposites, they're two sides of the same coin. Compassion without assertion is weakness. Assertion without compassion is cruelty. But together they create the kind of strength that changes lives. Let's take an example. Say you're a parent. Your child is struggling, acting out, making mistakes. Compassion will tell you to understand their pain, to empathize with their struggles. And that's good. That's necessary. But if all you do is empathize, if all you do is console, you're not helping them. You're enabling them. That's where assertion comes in. Assertion says, I love you too much to let you continue down this path. I see your potential and I won't let you settle for less than that. It's not about punishment or control. It's about guidance. It's about saying, I'll walk with you through this, but I won't let you give up. And this doesn't just apply to parenting. It applies to every relationship, every interaction, every moment of your life. Because the world doesn't need more people who are just compassionate or just assertive. It needs people who can embody both. But this isn't something you master overnight. It's a constant process of reflection, of growth, of trial and error. You'll make mistakes. You'll lean too far in one direction or the other. And that's okay. What matters is that you keep trying. What matters is that you recognize the importance of this balance and strive to embody it every day. Because when you do, something extraordinary happens. You become the kind of person who inspires trust, who commands respect, who makes others feel seen and valued. You become a true ally, a true leader, a true force for good in the world. And isn't that what we all want? To be the kind of person who lifts others up, who defends what's right, who makes the world a better place? It's not easy. It's not supposed to be. But it's worth it. It's always worth it. Criticism is inevitable. If you're living a life worth living, if you're aiming at something meaningful, if you're daring to stand out in any capacity, you will attract criticism. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And when it comes, it doesn't feel good, does it? It stings, it cuts. It makes you second guess yourself. But here's the thing, criticism is not your enemy. In fact, it's one of the greatest gifts you can receive, provided you're willing to confront it honestly. And that's no small task, because our first instinct when we're criticized is to become defensive, to reject it outright, to assume that the problem lies with the critic, not with us. But let's stop and think about that for a moment. What if, instead of running from criticism, you leaned into it? What if you treated it as an opportunity for growth, rather than a personal attack? Because that's what it is, an opportunity. Every piece of criticism, no matter how harsh or unfair, contains a seed of truth, and it's your job to find that seed, to nurture it, and to let it make you stronger. Let's be clear, though, not all criticism is created equal. Some of it is constructive, given with the intention of helping you grow, but some of it isn't. Some of it comes from a place of jealousy, bitterness, or insecurity. And part of your task is learning to tell the difference. So how do you do that? How do you discern between criticism that's worth listening to and criticism that isn't? You start by asking yourself a simple question: is this coming from someone who genuinely wants to see me improve, or is it coming from someone who wants to see me fail? If it's the former, then listen, even if it hurts. Especially if it hurts, because the truth often does. And if it's the latter, well, that's a different story. You don't have to internalize every word spoken against you. You don't have to carry the weight of every unfounded accusation. But even then, don't dismiss it entirely. Instead, ask yourself, why would they say this? What does their criticism reveal about them and about me? Because here's the hard truth: even your harshest critics can teach you something. They can teach you about your blind spots, your vulnerabilities, your weaknesses, and they can also teach you about your strengths. Because people don't criticize what they don't notice. If someone is going out of their way to attack you, it's often because you represent something they either envy or fear. So don't let criticism destroy you. Let it shape you. Let it refine you. Let it make you better, stronger, more resilient. Because every time you face criticism and grow from it, you're not just proving your critics wrong, you're proving yourself right. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Personal growth isn't just about handling criticism, it's also about learning to give it. And that's an art form in itself, because giving criticism is easy. Anyone can point out flaws, highlight mistakes, or call out shortcomings. But giving helpful criticism, that's a different story. That requires tact, empathy, and courage. When you criticize someone, you're stepping into dangerous territory. You're putting yourself in a position of authority, assuming the role of someone who knows better. And that's a heavy responsibility. Because the wrong words, spoken in the wrong way, can do immense damage. They can shatter confidence, undermine potential, and destroy relationships. So before you criticize, ask yourself, why am I doing this? Is it to help them? Or is it to make myself feel better? If your intention isn't to build them up, then maybe you should keep your thoughts to yourself. But if your intention is to help, then proceed carefully. Speak the truth, yes, but speak it with love. Offer solutions, not just problems, and be willing to walk alongside them as they work to improve. Because true criticism isn't about tearing people down, it's about lifting them up. Now, let's shift gears a bit. Because personal growth, as vital as it is, doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's deeply connected to something even greater: leadership. Leadership is one of the most misunderstood concepts in the world today. People think it's about authority, about power, about being in charge, but it's not. True leadership has nothing to do with dominance and everything to do with service. Leadership isn't about telling people what to do, it's about showing them how to do it. It's about setting an example, about being the kind of person others want to follow. And that's no small task, because people are watching. They're watching how you handle stress, how you treat others, how you respond to failure. And they're not just watching, they're learning. So what kind of example are you setting? Are you showing people what it means to live with integrity, to work hard, to take responsibility? Or are you teaching them to cut corners, to blame others, to avoid accountability? Because make no mistake, you're a leader, whether you realize it or not. You don't need a title or a position to lead. You just need to live in a way that inspires others. And that starts with yourself. You can't lead others if you can't lead yourself. You can't expect others to take you seriously if you're not taking your own life seriously. So, take a hard look at yourself. Are you living up to your potential? Are you striving to be better every day? Are you carrying your responsibilities with grace and strength? Because that's what true leadership looks like. It's not about being perfect, it's about being honest. It's about admitting your flaws, learning from your mistakes, and constantly striving to improve. And when you do that, you give others permission to do the same. Leadership isn't about standing above others, it's about standing beside them. It's about walking the path together, about sharing the load, about lifting each other up. And when you lead with that kind of humility, that kind of authenticity, people will follow. Not because they have to, but because they want to. But let's not sugarcoat this. Leadership is hard. It's lonely. It's exhausting. There will be days when you want to give up, when you want to hand the reins to someone else, when you feel like you're not making a difference. But those are the days that matter most. Those are the days that define you. Because leadership isn't about how you act when things are going well, it's about how you act when everything is falling apart. It's about staying strong when others are crumbling. It's about holding on to hope when others have lost it. And it's about finding the courage to keep going, even when every part of you wants to stop. And here's the thing, you won't always get it right. You'll make mistakes, you'll stumble, you'll fall. But that's okay. Because leadership isn't about being perfect, it's about being willing to try, to learn, to grow. It's about showing others that failure isn't the end, it's just another step on the journey. So, take up the mantle of leadership. Not because it's easy, but because it's worth it. Not because you have all the answers, but because you're willing to seek them. Not because you're fearless, but because you're willing to face your fears. Because the world doesn't need more critics, more cynics, more spectators. It needs leaders. It needs people who are willing to step up, to take responsibility, to show the way. And that starts with you. It always starts with you.